So, Stephen, you're up. Introduce you to Mr. Johnny Brown, and Johnny Brown, pleasure to introduce you to Stephen Yearhouse. You're two dyslexic gentlemen, and I'm the third. And we're here to talk a little bit about Johnny and your life history with dyslexia as a man who's now getting to the seventh decade of life, God willing, and talk about some of those experiences that have happened over time. And Stephen will chime in with some of his experiences that he had up to age 45 before he got online and strengthened some of his skills. And Johnny will be curious to hear some of your experiences and what you chose to do in your mid 60s when we put you online and started working on changing some of those skills as well. So I'll let the two of you start it off, which is kind of talking a few things back and forth about dyslexia from that generations of perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Conway, for having me on. I appreciate it.
And I should have said, sorry, my background here. Yesterday was the amazing give for the kids at my school here at the Einstein School. And here's a bunch of the kids in the Einstein School. And Johnny, if you can't believe it, these kids all have dyslexia. But every single one of them are smiling and they're wearing I love my school shirts. And do you know why they love their school? Because that school is teaching them how to read. And they're out there working hard to help fundraise for their school. It's the Einstein School in Gainesville, Florida. About 120 kids in that school in grades 2 through 8. And all of them get the Now programs for free. It's built into the school. It's part of the curriculum. There's no reason for dyslexia schools to be so astronomically expensive. That's a free nonprofit charter school providing dyslexia intervention for free. So I just thought you'd like to find that interesting compared to your life experience. We're making changes.
Very good. Yeah, it's really amazing what it can do, what it does do.
So Johnny, why don't you start out giving us a little bit of background information about you? I mean, to start from the beginning.
Okay.
What was it like growing up? How was your family life? And then kind of walk into how that went into your school life.
I grew up with, had 3 brothers. When we were always at each other, calling names, we'd come up with some of the most creative names you could ever imagine. And, but I get together with my brothers once a year now. And the first time we got together, I told them, because like I said, we were bad, we were rough with each other. But I told them I never remembered one time my brothers making fun of me or kidding me about anything regarding what was going on with me in school. And I'm so glad it was that way. I'm not sure how I would have handled it if they started getting into that. But I'm now doing video production, post-production. I even still do a little bit of radio. And I've been doing that now for over 35 years. My resume, I got to the point I just said over 20 because you start thinking I'm as old as I am. But I had a great mom and dad. They were very loving, but all this manifested itself in a huge way in the first grade, in the second grade. And that's when I take these report cards home. First and second grade, where they give you check marks. You're satisfactory, unsatisfactory. There's another category. I can't remember what it was. And then there's citizenship. And I remember my dad looking at those report cards and saying, well, at least he knows how to keep his mouth shut because I got an S in citizenship or whatever they called it at the time. And so just things like that. Sundays was a real bad time, knowing that I was going to school the next day. And as Dr. Conway explained to me, I'm going to school every day, unable and unprepared to do what was going to be required of me. They didn't know anything about ADHD or any of those things, dyslexia. And there were so many myths about it as well. But, you know, I've had a very blessed life. And I didn't choose some of the things that some people would choose, the drugs and the stealing maybe and that kind of thing. That just, I knew that was wrong. That saved me from a lot, I believe. No. So it's been a two-edged sword. But the first time I met Dr. Conway, he was a guest in our home, and I had once he'd gotten there, we stood in the foyer. He says he held the suitcase for an hour without putting it down, and that's probably true. But I was fascinated. Here, this brain scientist is, and I'm able to talk to him about what's going on. And about 5 or 6, maybe 7 years prior to that, I suspected that I might be dyslexic. So I started doing some research on the internet before any time with Dr. Conway. And
how long ago was this?
That was probably a lot further back than I'm even considering. It was probably 85 or so, maybe. 1985, something like that, maybe. And then the years went, didn't think about it again. And then as soon as he told me, Dr. Conway said that he did these attention deficit specialties and learning difficulties. So it kind of got kicked off from there.
So talk a little bit about your experience in school. Because when we were talking earlier, I mean,
yes,
our lives parallel when we start talking about our experiences in school.
Right.
Because I'm not much younger than you are, but back when I was in school, while you knew about dyslexia, but they still didn't do anything about it. Well, I guess it's a lot like they do today, but still. So listening to your story going on, I could draw so many different parallels to it. So I want you to talk a little bit about your experiences in school.
I remember they kept me back in the 5th grade. And I found out that my 4th grade teacher had considered keeping me back, but decided that she would send me to the 5th grade. And I took that twice. And I was okay with that. I remember Dad came home that time when I was kept back, and he said, got out of his car from working, and he said to me, "There's a lot of great men that have struggled with this kind of thing, and don't let it get you down that you're kept back." And that, those kinds of things, after you have all the negative and you hear something like that from your parents, that made a huge difference in the way I accepted that and the way I moved on past that. I remember getting to the class. I tried to get to my classes as soon as I could get there before anyone got there, to where I could hide in the back of the room. And I did that as much as I could. Of course, they always found me. And that hiding thing, that's something that, just kind of keeps going. It's like I was talking before, these things that you become habitual in doing to try to skate by.
It's survival, right? It is
survival.
You said something earlier where you were saying you were going to school and being asked to do something that you couldn't do.
That's right.
So while in today's time we talk about superpowers or gifts or whatever, with the kids who have dyslexia or learning disabilities, and I try to get people to understand that it's not so much as it is a superpower as we have honed that skill so sharply to make sure that we can survive. It's a survival mechanism more than it is a superpower. And that's not to say that anybody else that was put into a situation much like that wouldn't hone certain other skills to be able to survive. We were put into an environment that
That's right.
we could not physically be successful in. So all we had to do is try to survive it, and that's what we ended up doing.
When I was find myself at the back of the room, the teacher would find me. I can remember this happening a lot. And just the moment that she called on me, I had such a history, the other kids in the class. The moment she asked me to stand and to read, I would begin to hear laughing and snickering. And at that point in time, I found I could stand there, and I don't know how much time's passing. I just would freeze, probably standing there with my mouth open, and then just sweating bullets because of all the pointing and so on that was going on. But, you know, again, because of my faith, I would not let a lot of these things get to me. And because it was survival, Richard, it was, Stephen, I'm sorry. It was survival. I did a lot of fist fighting too. And I guess I had some anger issues. I did a lot of that. Never felt like I started anything, but I was always ready to fight.
And Johnny, we may not call it anger issues as much as you lived in an environment that carried a heavy load of frustration because you're in the school environment, you're being asked to read, you're being asked to spell, but nobody's actually taught you how to read and spell. So you're being asked to do things that no one has taught you how to do, which is the recipe for high frustration. And that wasn't just one class that would happen to you. It would happen in every class of every day of every week in school. And you've even mentioned before about how you felt on Sundays, knowing that Monday was a school day. And I think
but not knowing why I was.
Yeah, right.
Just not knowing. And even today, Sundays can be kind of a depressing day for me sometimes, which still surprises me that I still deal with that.
Yeah,
I mean, it goes to show how much the consider little things in life, how deeply they affect us, and we carry on with this all the way through adulthood. Because, I mean, like I said earlier, as many times that I've talked in front of adults, I've had grown men come to me crying, going, "How did you tell my story? How did you know?" Because your story is my story. Yes, we are taught that yes, everybody should be able to read, everybody should be able to do this, everybody should be successful, and if you can't do it, well, then there's something wrong with you.
Right.
And while yes, we know that there's a struggle. However, we know that there's a struggle in a particular area. However, those emotions from not being able to be successful there, they carry over into other aspects of life. That going on to what you were talking about, I was ready to fight at any point in time. Yeah, we stay at a heightened level of fight or flight, and typically it's just that we're either going to fight it or we're going to get out.
Right.
And let me add a science piece to this as well, because we know that today people are talking about how, well, dyslexic brains, they work differently. They just learn differently. And I'm a PhD brain scientist. So let me recouch what they've misunderstood from the research. The research doesn't show that their brains physiologically work differently or learn differently. What it shows is when a child hasn't learned how to read and you put them in a scanner and you measure their brain activity, you get one pattern of activity where there's more activity on the right and less on the left. When a child does know how to read and you put them in the brain scanner and you look at the brain activity, you see a different picture. There's more activity on the left and there's smaller activity on the right. So that's where some people get stuck and they say, see, their brains work differently. Well, but why would you think the brain activity patterns would look the same when the kids don't have the same skills. So then the end point of that is when you've put children through remediation and you've rebuilt these left hemisphere skills of phonological awareness and being able to sound words out and figure words out, and they're spelling better and they're reading better. And then we see that we now have trained their brain to be successful in reading and spelling, which all dyslexic brains have the ability to do that. And as you guys know, I'm dyslexic as well, but I got prevention at age 5. And we take the child who has dyslexia, who had effective evidence-based remediation, which means it's been scientifically tested and proven to be highly effective. And you put that child back in the brain scanner, we measure their brain activity. Guess what? They have small activity on the right, just like the good readers do. And they have large activity on the left, just like the good readers do, because now both kids we're comparing both have good reading skills. So it's not so much that your brain is hardwired to work differently as it is until you get effective instruction that builds those phonological skills, builds those decoding skills. The brain doesn't have the opportunity to build the wiring it needs to build unless you give it the proper training. We call that experience-dependent neuroplasticity. And that goes back to what you two were just saying earlier is, Johnny went into a field that's a visual arts field with production and movie and photography because he spent a lot of time picturing a lot of stuff in his brain, visualizing it and seeing it because he couldn't read it very well and he couldn't write it very well. And so by doing more and more practice with that imagery, you honed, perfected, and advanced that skill.
That's right.
You weren't genetically born with better mental imagery skills. You just practiced it a whole bunch.
We're back to that flight or fight again. I mean, that's why that happened. Do what you do good.
That's right.
You enjoy it and make money by it. Then I was all about it.
I mean, that's human nature is to run away or lean away, I guess I should say, things that are more difficult, especially when you're starting out in life and you're trying to figure out what do I want to do. I want to make some money. I've got to be able to support my kids or my family when I get it, support myself at the time. And you got to figure out, okay, what can I do? Well, we're going to gravitate to things that we don't struggle as much. And at that point, we're going to gravitate towards things that we don't typically have to do a whole lot of reading. However, I went into a field that I ended up having to do a whole lot of reading. I just powered through it as much as I could. I went into the IT field. So being a systems admin, you have nothing but huge, thick books. And I used to joke about it. I don't know why I ever thought that I would go into a field that had that much reading.
Right. I'm still such a slow reader. When I go to church and the preacher's going through it and he'll say, you might want to write this down, flip over here and we'll be right back over here in a minute. And it's like, I can't do that and listen to him. I can't do it. Even today, I can't do it.
That typically comes with, have you heard the old adage that the more you do it, the better you get, the faster you get, the more you practice, the better you get.
Right.
So that's where that really starts to come in. Once you have the skill, the more you do it, the faster you get, the better you are. So, when we start talking about remediation, when you were going through the Now Foundation program, you get the foundation piece of it correct. You start being able to sound out the sounds. You're able to break the sounds apart and segmenting, and you're able to do that piece of it faster and faster and faster. Well, then it becomes, for lack of a medical term, it becomes muscle memory, and you're not having to use as much brain power to do those things, right? So the more you practice reading, now that you've gone through remediation, the more you practice that, the faster you get, the more that you're going to be able to retain and hold on for that mental imagery piece or the comprehension piece, right? So the more you do, the faster you get, the better you're going to be. And you really have to lean into those skills and really push the fight or flight response away. Because we'll run into those words where you you haven't seen the word before, and you're going to have to sound it out. And you go, that's a pretty big word. And, well, no, I know how to do this. And you make yourself go through it and sound it out. And you're like, oh, okay, I can do that.
I found myself and still find that true. And this has been a conscious thing over the last couple of months, is that I would bail out quickly in terms of even trying to spell that word. I'd forget it. I can, Siri, how do you spell this?
List. List.
Sorry. Yeah. She's coming in. She's still listening.
You said her name and she responded.
And here's the thing. So as an adult, we can choose to use accommodations. That's an accommodation, right? Spell check is an accommodation. Text to speech is an accommodation.
That's
right? We can choose to use these accommodations to get through our day-to-day life, right? But the more we practice those new skills, the less we have to use those accommodations. Like, I still use audio books and whatever else. However, I don't use them because I can't read. I use them because it helps me save time. So I can do multiple things at one time. I can listen to a book and mow the yard or tend to the cows or whatever. So I'm still gaining that knowledge that I'm listening to the book or enjoying that book. However, I can still sit down and read a book just as quick as listen to it. So I want people to understand that when we're talking about people with dyslexia and accommodations, we don't have to not ever use them ever again. That's silly. We use them by choice at that point.
That's right.
I think an interesting comparison between the two of you is, Stephen, you are 45 and you finished that Now Foundations program, and you've now had a couple of years since then of just continued use of these skills because you got all the way through the program. That means the skills should be much more automatic, like you're talking about. They're more effortless. They don't take as much energy. They don't take as much time. And you can choose, do I want to read it or do I want to listen to audiobook? Because both work for you. Johnny, you made it partway through the program. We've paused it for a little bit, and you started to feel those skills get stronger, but they weren't as well trained, so they're not going to be as automatic yet. And even if you keep using them, they'll still get a little bit stronger, but it won't be the more, drastic change of skills over time until we finish rebuilding that whole system. But it gave you at age 67 an experience of, I actually can learn how to sound out words better. And I'm just curious to hear more from you about how did that feel for you? Because some adults have we call it a paradoxical reaction, meaning it doesn't fit. It's like they're excited about reading, but they're angry about learning to read at the same time. Tell us a little bit about that.
Explain that in slow motion for me.
Well, we know you're excited about it, but it also was really just, frightening or almost just anxiety producing at the same time, even though you knew you were getting better.
Right. Even when I think I've spelled the word correctly, I'll go back. Most of the time it's spelled correctly. It was just my not certain about it. The use the word afraid, I think, in terms of doing that in front of someone and getting embarrassed about it, because I've become pretty good at that. And I think it's what Dr. Conway said to me in the beginning seemed like it helped a lot, just knowing it, just knowing that I legitimately had something that was not the best way to learn. And I didn't feel that separation from the task as much as I used to. The sensitivity of it, I'm sensitive about what was going on, what the world thought about my struggle. and now there are some parts I've relaxed in terms of being a better reader, comprehending more readily. I still need some work there because a lot of it's a drift factor. Just go to something else and more now than before. Wasn't a matter of forgetting. Well, I guess it was because I'd leave the room to go do something, and then I'd think about several other things, and then what did I come into this room for now? What was the purpose in this little trip? So it's hard for me to know what is a latent issue, and then I had to measure between, is it the fact that it's difficult to do, or am I lazy, or what's at the base of this? And I think the answer is you do all of those things, whatever it takes, wherever you are, you adjust as you go. And I found myself doing that a lot. But I really stayed away from reading until, several years ago. I just didn't enjoy it, but I do enjoy it now. So that's a huge thing in itself.
And then how did
Johnny,
that? Sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
I was just going to say, to give you an example, kind of where Dr. Conway was going is, I can tell you, for me, when I first started going through NF, within the first week of doing it, I was really, really angry.
You were what?
And I was angry.
Yes.
And it was because I now knew, and I was going through it, when I was going through the program, I was going at it from a little different perspective. I was going at it from, I want to prove Dr. Conway wrong. And I didn't do it. I didn't prove him wrong, right? I understood where that deficit was and why I had that deficit. And the reason why I got so angry is because I knew at that point in time that life could have been so much different for me and my family. And, I know that while I felt smart, I felt smarter than pretty much everybody in the room. I knew I had this ability to do more, be more. However, I knew that I couldn't perform like the rest of the kids in the class. So for the first time, I really understood that that old saying, you can be whatever you want to be. I truly felt that. I knew that I could be whatever I wanted to be, and I could do anything. Now that I'm getting that piece of it remediated. And that made me angry because not only for my own life, but now looking at it from an advocate's standpoint and seeing how many other kids and families are affected by lack of remediation or lack of good remediation.
My oldest son is dyslexic, and when we started getting accommodations for him, it immediately made a difference. But he's a fireman, and he was going to be a paramedic, and he had taken the classes. He'd taken the test, the final test, like 6 times, I believe it was. And if he flunked it again on the 7th, he had to go back to college again. And so he got to that point at the end, and he quit. He quit doing it. And he's very successful. He's got his own business. He's an entrepreneur. If he'd have gotten some of those accommodations before he took those tests, he would have done a lot better. But he chose not to now, but he's done well, and I feel I feel like I've I've found myself in the same situation. Excuse me.
And Johnny, let me just jump in and say, we know that he did what he could do, and he had to work around those weaker skills. But we also still wonder too, but what if he didn't have to do that? What if he got effective remediation early? What if he got prevention early and reading wasn't a struggle? Sure, he might still choose to be the same entrepreneur, but he might be that entrepreneur 10 times fold, he might have chose to do something else. But the bottom line is remediation doesn't take away kids' skills, because people will say to me, well, I don't want to lose my superpowers. I don't want to have remediation. We're like, well, it's not going to take anything away if we effectively teach you how to read. It just gives you more effective skills that you can choose to use to do what you want to do, not just to avoid things and try to only do what you think you can do. It's a big difference.
It's right. And it's like Stephen said, he's confident he could do anything. And Jay's that way, my son's that way, and I'm that way. I do a lot of different things, everything from mechanicking work. I play around with some instruments, and the creative process is as grand just about as it gets. With digital, you have you can shoot without thinking about it if you want to, and that's immediate gratification and looking at it and going home or going to the car and pulling out the laptop and work with it in Photoshop. I love that process.
So Johnny, I call what we're dealing with right now as an adult. I like to speak an analogy because it gets people to picture what I'm saying and really get the meaning behind it.
Right.
Is we deal with I call it the elephant theory. And I mean, if you picture an elephant at a circus, like a roadside circus or whatever, I ask the question, how do they keep that elephant from running off? Well, they put a chain around one of its legs, right? They put it to a stake, and they chain the elephant to the stake. Well, the elephant is the strongest land mammal that we have. Do you think that if that elephant really wanted to go, that he couldn't break that chain or rip that stake out of the ground? Right?
That's good. Right.
So, but why does that elephant not do that? There's a reasoning behind it, and we're talking about this very reason. Do you know why the elephant doesn't do it? Because that chain has been around his foot since he was a little baby. So he has known from the get-go, from the very first time, that he couldn't break that chain because he's tried every which way to break that chain when he was younger. And now that he's older, he's just settled into, I tried 100,000 times and it never worked. So I'm not going to try anymore. And that's what we're talking about.
You're right.
So we have to understand that that's where leaning into those newfound skills, right? And knowing that we can read, we can sound out that word, and we just have to erase the flight aspect of it, and we're going to fight. We're going to fight because we know that we have those skills, and we know that we can do these things.
Very true. It is.
So that's my analogy on that.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, and those realizations continue to come. And it's gone through our entire lifetime of doing these things, and we don't know the complete analogy of it, but we know what you get to the point where a great philosopher Clint Eastwood once said, a man's got to know his limitations. And I don't feel like we have a lot of limitations in terms of what we do now or how we learned how to do it. And I would just bought an editing system years ago and taught myself how to use it. I used to stay late at work, and I would work in Photoshop and learn how to do it. But at first, it's like, well, I don't know if I can do this, but let's see if we can. And if it's a creative process, it's easy to stay in that vein.
And Johnny, you said you used to not like to read. You used to avoid reading, but since you started improving some of those skills, you find reading more easy.
Yes.
How does that impact your creative process? That's because, again, some parents say to me, "Oh, you're going to hinder the child. Don't take away his creative power." But what has it done for you in terms of having the ability to read and still wanting to learn software and still doing video production and still doing the creative piece of it? What's that been like?
It's in this little domain of what we're doing and the choices that we've made. And as you see, for instance, I had some compatibility issues with my camera. Bought a new camera. My old computer wouldn't work with it. And so I have to find out what's the problem. And that analytical aspect of it comes into play as a mechanic or the other things that I've done through my life. And it's again, like I said a moment ago, I'm not bailing on that thought. I'm not just barely getting started and decide I can't do it and I don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
There's not so much of that.
Nice.
And it's
so more persistent, you're saying. You're more likely to persist with it, figure it out.
Exactly. Whether it be spelling a word or whether it be with doing some other task. Mm-hmm. It's just, I can't get impatient with myself.
Because you found success. You found success in those areas, right? You know that the longer you sit there, the more that you do it, the more that you try other things, you've found that you're going through the logical steps of troubleshooting or learning something. However, we haven't been able to, there's a difference between that piece of it and then your wiring of your brain not in the right place.
That's right.
So we have the ability to look at troubleshooting because that's you're doing that a lot in your environment, in your job. I do it every day. We know that there's logical steps to troubleshooting. Is the computer on? Is it plugged in? Does it have power? These type of things. Is my coffee holder tray, is it in the right place? And for those that have never heard that, that's your CD-ROM. So we know that we can go down these steps because we know that at the end of all of these steps, we should find the answer, right? And the reason why we know that we should find the answer is because we've tried all of these steps and we know that that's a logical progression. When it comes to reading, we were never taught the logical progression of reading. We weren't able to be taught in the way that they are teaching us the logical progression. The reason why we weren't able to be taught is because they weren't teaching it. They weren't teaching the logical progression of reading. Sounds first, making sure that you can distinguish between the sounds. Okay, you can distinguish between the sounds. Okay, let's move forward to the next thing. Well, now let's be able to break those sounds apart. Put them together, break them apart. It's the logical steps of how a skill is developed.
I see what you're saying.
Johnny, do you remember when you first started doing those lessons online? What did that feel like? Is those skills that were hard or those skills that were easy when you first learned about those sounds? Any memories come back from those first experiences?
That if I stayed with it, I could tell there was an improvement. Once my tutor knew what my weaknesses were, then I didn't feel like I was going to have to do something I couldn't do, or she's going to know. And for instance, getting occasion cards from people, Christmas, birthday, whatever it was. my reading was so labored that I could tell you a handful of times that I finished reading the complete card and not just act like I had read it. That was something that was not shocking, but kind of ticked me off a little bit because I couldn't. That was a time, I guess, my dad saying that I would regret it. I regretted having that kind of a struggle, if that is better.
And then it just gives you more opportunities to do more of what you want to do.
That's right.
Because I know you figured out the software that you were learning, computer software like Photoshop or Adobe Premiere, things like that. But what if you could have read the manuals and figured it out?
Right.
What would that have been like for you if you had both sets of skills and you could do a little bit of each and you do whichever one you want to do, not just only the one that you can do?
Right. I hear you. Yes.
Now, I remember too, when you were starting your lessons, and we have to remind the audience, you're in your 60s when you decided, I'm still going to tackle this. I'd still like to see if I can improve my reading skills. Another way to say that is Dr. Conway might not be lying to me. It might actually still be possible. But still.
Well, when another instructor would come on with Stacy,
yeah,
I would kind of lock up a little bit. This person don't know me. She don't know what my weaknesses are.
Yeah.
And that made me real nervous.
And part nervous, part embarrassment factor. Don't want to look like you can't do this.
All
don't want to look like you're not smart enough to do it.
And I'd rather be outside doing something else than in here doing this I'm struggling with, and I'd rather not deal with this. And I remember telling through the years. That's but I question those kinds of things now, so I will get better about not doing it or even having that mindset that I can't do it.
When you told me sometimes you'd be happy when you heard your tutor couldn't come to the lesson today. Like, that's
right. Yeah. Woo, I'm so glad. See if I can come up with something tomorrow that I can do. Have a couple of days to stretch through this.
Even though you were getting better and the skills were getting stronger and it was working. And you and I talked about, remember when we talked about PTSD from school?
Yes.
Yeah. What did that mean to you when I said to you, Johnny, these are things that are triggering your negative experiences that you had back in the school days? And it'll flood right back to you just like you were right back in that classroom. And the kids are pointing, the kids are shaking their fingers, and that, unhappy feelings come right back strong.
Oh, yes. It's some things that I don't know. It's something that I've never dealt with. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking I can do that, but I don't want to mess with taking the time to do it at that point. Some days, yes, but other days you just go back into these bad habits of skipping through it and not facing it. It's a lot of denial going on.
There definitely is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. I mean, I know that whenever I first was getting ready to go through NF, you got to come to the realization that this is what we're faced with. If it doesn't work, that's what I was thinking about. If it doesn't work, then I am all of those things that people said about me. And Dr. Conway is selling snake oil. And then that just sets me back that much further. So that I had to get past that piece of it and go into it with open arms and just be like, you know what? It is what it is. And that's the reason why I went down the path of trying to prove her wrong. And I analyzed everything we were doing. I know that my instructor probably was sick and tired of me asking so many questions and going, oh, I see why you're doing that. Oh, okay, I understand. And she was like, would you just say the word? Would you, could you just do what I'm asking you to? And I'm sitting there going, well, I gotta understand this. I gotta understand why you're asking me this. And I dove into it a lot deeper than what the normal person would probably do. But again, it was strictly because I was trying to prove it wrong.
And that's why that NF stands for that Now Foundations program. We had to go all the way down to the foundation of speech processing first, because everybody speaks first and you learn letters later. And once you can know how to speak and you know how to learn your letters, then the reading and spelling comes if you have a very structured, systematic, well-designed and evidence-based literacy program. But we got to go down to the foundation first. And so working with adults, one of the things we first have to explain to them is, what are we doing and why are we going to do it? Because just like what Stephen was saying, he was seeking out to understand, what's the purpose of this? What's the purpose of this? How do these parts fit together? Why am I doing this? Because if you understand the logic and you understand the developmental hierarchy that we're taking you through, with the mouth pictures to the sounds, to blending sounds, to segmenting sounds, to judging those 5 changes of adding sounds, omitting, substituting, shifting, repeating, then you are now a much more active, engaged learner, because you know what we're doing and why we're doing it, and you can put more energy and time into it.
That's right. I found that I could get my instructor sometimes to just start talking about something else, and I wouldn't have to go through the stuff. And then I start thinking about it that I'm doing that, and I'm thinking, still up to your old tricks. It's just sad but true.
Old habits die hard.
Especially that one.
That's and I talk about this a lot. We unknowingly teach our kids to manipulate. We learn how to manipulate because
real good at.
Have you ever met anybody that had to go through physical therapy that was just like, yes, I get to go to physical therapy today? No, it's hard. It's hard work. And when you're done, your brain hurts, or whatever you're going to
right.
get therapy on hurts.
Maybe
right?
both.
I remember days where my brain hurt from my eyebrows back to the back of my head. However, it's the same thing with physical therapy. Either you're going to do these things and you're going to get stronger. And yes, it's going to be a little bit painful during the process, but it's a good pain because you're actually building new processes. You're building new skills. You're getting stronger, just like you would if you had a shoulder injury. You're getting stronger in your shoulder every time you go to therapy.
Right.
You're getting stronger every time you sit there and you go through a session every day. It wouldn't hurt, even hurt in my eyes. I mean, literally, my head was numb from my eyebrows to the back of my head.
And that's a testament to how much brain work the team is making you do. In a properly trained intervention, those neurons are firing. And when they fire together, they begin to wire together. And when they wire together enough, then the processing that used to be hard becomes easier and the skills become stronger. And then the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. And so I think, Johnny, one important message the audience would love to hear from you today is, at age 67, was it still possible to change your reading skills?
Absolutely was.
And that's, people ask me that all the time.
The more quickly I learned it. But it's a matter of turning yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like getting past these things that have been roadblocks for me. And they're not really roadblocks. I suspected, or they are roadblocks, but I suspected that I could move past those, even before I met you, Dr. Conway.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, how do you want to wrap us up?
Well, let me add to it, Johnny, that I know that there's a lot of people out there that struggle with the word disability, and you kind of hit on this a little bit earlier. When you talked about, I can do all of these other things. I can do all of these things other than read, right?
Right.
So it's not an inability to do anything in life. It's a disability in a certain area or aspect of life. I would tell people, okay, well, if it's not a disability, if I show up to a doctor's office and I have to fill out, a packet of paperwork, or I have to go read through a contract or whatever, guess who shows up with me? My disability.
Mm-hmm.
But you
And
put
then
me
I
on.
took my wife with me. She's my
Right.
asset.
Yeah,
And I
well,
get her to fill
that's
out
our,
work
hey,
in the doctor's
that's
office.
our workarounds.
That's right.
I married the smartest person I could find because I know I needed all the help that I could get, right?
That's right.
But I mean, we tend to throw ourselves in all these other areas, and we become what is the old saying? Jack of all trades, but a master of none.
Master of none, yes.
However, we become a master in all those areas because we have to be able to do something, right? So, I mean, that's the thing I want people to take away is just because you have dyslexia and you have an inability to read today doesn't mean that that is something that you're going to have to bear for the rest of your life. We can remediate you to become a avid reader, like my friend Officer Deputy David Agata, who's over here always bragging about how many books he reads.
Now he brags about it.
Yeah, but I mean, that's my buddy. He's out there just killing it when it comes to how many books he reads. He sends me texts all the time. Oh, I've read this many books. I've read this many books. Hey, slow down. You're doing too much, David. You're making the rest of us look bad. But anyway, yeah, your story is very important to tell, and I am very glad that we got to sit here and have this discussion and hear about your story.
I appreciate the opportunity because as we discuss it, and I hear you guys sharing what you're telling me, I get a lot of peace from that, to know that I can see the progress that I've made. When there were some points where I wasn't sure what I was going to be able to do. But like you said, you know that you can do anything you set your mind to.
And let me add, Stephen and Johnny, that Johnny's been doing some video production. He's calling them Little Johnny Stories. And we put one on below the link to this live Facebook or live YouTube talk. And he's got a series more coming. And each one is just trying to share part of that history, part of that experience of dyslexia that wasn't the superpower experience. But it's important for people to understand as we try to figure out how do we do better at earlier identification, earlier remediation, earlier empowerment. So I'm just going to hit the highlights of your ones to come so people keep following and looking for this. He's got another episode coming called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Another one called The Lost Dog. Another one called The Long Walk. Another one called Now What? A really powerful one called The Fake Report Card. We know that usually means the parents are not going to be happy. And then there's
that was maddening.
Yeah, the other shoe will drop. There's coming the last straw.
And these are working titles, so they may vary a little bit.
That's okay. We just want to let people know that Johnny's doing a great job of really helping create these little video vignettes, 2 to 3 minute videos that help tell some important parts of that dyslexia story, and also help challenge us to say, but we can do better now. We know how to do early intervention. We know how to do early enrichment. We know how to do prevention. You know, and I spent 10 years doing stroke rehab, rebuilding reading skills after brain damage, which is 1,000 times more complicated than just helping somebody with dyslexia. So hopefully
Johnny,
some are watching today who understand that they feel like dyslexia is lifelong because it's never gotten better for them. But you can't expect the brain to change the skills if it does not get the proper instruction. So it's not your brain that's the trouble, because we have all the science in the world telling us we can change reading skills at any age, even with brain damage. But if you don't get the right proper instruction that's evidence-based, then it's not you that's the problem. It's the instruction that you have not received yet.
Very true.
Steve, you want to wrap us up? We would got to close for the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think you did a great job wrapping it up there. You know, I just let everybody know, you know, make sure that you come back and we'll continue to have these.
There was something freeing about it. I'm sorry. There was something very freeing when Dr. Conway told me that I suffer from post-traumatic stress. That's kind of made a lot of what didn't make sense in the past clearer and clearer because of just knowing that one truth.
You know, it's funny. The post-traumatic stress disorder. We were talking about that. I went, well, back when all of us were younger, they didn't have anything called post-traumatic PTSD.
Right.
It was shut up, boy, go to school.
Right.
You know, it was the pick yourself up by your bootstraps and just keep moving on. And now we have an understanding of what it is and why it affected us so deeply. And the more that we start peeling that onion back, you know, the great thing is we can stop a lot of this from happening to so many others because of our knowledge now.
Yes.
And I got to throw in one more thing, Steve, because you guys touched on this, which is accommodations and assisted devices work until they don't. You know, it's great to have a pen that reads for you. It's great to have spell check, but how does that help you when you're driving down the road and you got to read a street sign? It doesn't. And so understand that all of those things come with limitations, whereas true literacy is the most freeing thing we can give anybody. And so it's just so important to focus more on building the skills because we know the brain can do it if they get the evidence-based instruction. The accommodations will never let someone function at their true potential.
Right. I have to say, though, I was one of the first ones in line to get that spell check when they came out. I like that accommodation big time.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you both for being on the show tonight. We thank all the listeners for joining us and the questions. Who knows, maybe one of these episodes we'll get Sheriff Deputy Agata up there and hear about his story and what number of novels he's read in the last couple of years since he changed his brain's wiring, built his reading skills, and he was not as old as you, John. He was in his 50s. He's older than Steve.
He's making both of us look bad with that kind of stuff.
That's it. All right, guys. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next Friday. Typically going to be 5 Eastern, but we'll always post the time. Take care.
Appreciate you.
See ya. Bye.